All right, good morning, Math 8 students. I hope you guys are getting ready for another solid week. 3 weeks to go of the school year, so let's get right down to it. You're going to want to open the document that I sent to you with the Google message. It's attached at the bottom of that message, and you're going to want to take a look at the page that you see in front of you on this video. I'm going to explain certain parts about the video here, and if you can open up the document on another device and maybe watch this video on your phone, that could be helpful so you can kind of have that document in front of you the whole time. I highlighted the very important stuff on this document. Pink and green are kind of the patterns that you'll see. So you're going to want to read over the information at the top, and we're going to jump down to the first example here. We're going to look at a situation where we've got a graph that has two endpoints, and we're looking at the domain and range. So, domain. Domain is the furthest to the left and the furthest to the right. So it says here the graph has two endpoints. Yeah, I see one endpoint down to the lower left, one endpoint in the middle right. I want to know how far to the left it has gone. And if I count over, I can see it's -7. That's how far to the left my graph is. Now, if I go to see how far to the right our graph is, I can count and see that it's over 5. So remember, -7 in pink's the furthest to the left. 5 is how far we've gone to the right. So let's keep those numbers in mind. I've got -7 and 5, and I want to use them both in my answer. Here's how I do it. I put a -7 on the far left of this little answer right here. -7 to the far left, +5 to the far right. In the middle, I put x because we're talking about domain. We're talking about x values. And then I've got two inequality symbols. So a little review of inequality symbols. Less than or equal to and less than. That's what you see in this problem here. -7 is less than or equal to x. The reason I put less than or equal to x, you can see I've highlighted it. It's a closed circle. Back on my graph, I've got a closed shaded in circle, whatever you want to call it here at -7. So that's why it's -7 less than or equal to x. Okay, the next symbol says less than 5. Well, less than comes with an open circle. Back to my graph, if I've got an open circle, it's just a less than symbol. So that's how I get my final answer of -7, less than or equal to x, and just a less than 5. All right, let's look at range. We're looking at green information now. Do you guys agree the lowest this graph goes is down 3, -3? Yeah, that's true, and the highest it goes is +1. So it's going to be simpler now because we already did one similar to this. Our answer is going to have -3 on the left, 1 on the right. There's a y in the middle. That's because we're looking at the range. We're looking at y values. Okay, and then the last thing is the symbols, just like last time. We've got a less than or equal to, and then we've got a less than. Let me remind you why that is. -3 is the lowest, and it's a closed circle, so that's why we do less than or equal to. +1's the highest this graph goes, up 1, and it's an open circle, so it's just a less than symbol. So that explains this example on the front of the notes. Okay guys, if you're following along on the document that I sent, I'm now on example 2 on the next page of this document, this notes document. So here's the graph for example 2. Remember, I want to look and find the furthest point to the left and the furthest point to the right. So if I look at this picture, I'm saying, okay, where's the furthest point to the left in this picture? And it's right there at the origin. That's the furthest we go to the left. That's at 0. And the furthest we go to the right in this picture, you can see an arrow to the right. That means it's going to go on forever and ever and never ever stop. So we can write our answer in two different ways. Let me show you those. One way is just to write x is greater than or equal to 0. Because think about it. If the furthest to the left we go is 0, then the values that x could be from this graph are anything that are bigger than 0. So think about numbers you could plug in there to make that true. 1, 2, 20, 50, 100. Those are all numbers greater than or equal to 0, just like the domain of this graph. So you could just write x is greater than or equal to 0. The other way we could write this is we could put it into the notation I have here. The furthest to the left is 0. That should come as no surprise. Then it's a less than or equal to symbol. That's because the graph goes to that origin spot. It goes to that spot that we looked at right here. The rule is if there's not an open circle and there's not a closed circle, you just pretend like it's a closed circle. A shaded in circle, I should say. So 0 is less than or equal to x. And finally, this is a little bit weird, but it's less than infinity. Remember, this graph has the arrow to the right? The arrow to the right shows it's never going to stop. If you keep going further and further to the right, you're going to reach infinity. We put 0 less than or equal to x and less than infinity. It's always a less than symbol anytime you have infinity involved. How about the range? Look back at this graph. What's the lowest our graph goes? Yeah, right there at that pink dot. The lowest it goes is also 0. What's the highest our graph will ever go? The highest it will ever go is positive infinity because there's an arrow that's pointing upward. It's upward and to the right. So the way we could write our range answer is y is greater than or equal to 0. That's because the y values will always be 0 or greater. So you could write it as y is greater than or equal to 0. Or really similar to what we saw up above, 0 less than or equal to y. That's the only change. The x turned into a y. And finally, less than infinity. All right, time for the third example now. Just a couple more minutes, guys. Hang in there. Pause the video if you need to, but let's do this third example so you guys are ready for the matching activity. Here's the graph in the third example. You want to ask yourself, what's the furthest we go to the left and the furthest to the right? Well, it looks like right here I've got an arrow. It's definitely going upward, but this part of the graph is also going to the left. So I would say that's the furthest I see to the left. This is the furthest I see to the right, this arrow that's pointing to the right. So if my graph continued along the path of those arrows, I would go left forever and ever and right forever and ever. Well, that means you would have all numbers taken up. If you go left forever and right forever, all numbers will be in the graph that we would be looking at if we continued the lines. Our domain, therefore, is all real numbers. We can either say all real numbers, or we can use this symbol right here. It's like a capital R with an extra line down the back. That is the symbol that means all real numbers. Finally, one more way, if you like this way, it's good to know. We said it's going to go left forever and right forever. That's the lowest. That's the furthest left and furthest right that you would end up with on this graph. So we can say negative infinity is less than x, and that's less than positive infinity. That's another way to write it. So you've got 1, 2, 3 different ways to write your answer. Finally, back to our graph. Let's do the range. Remember, domain is how far left and how far right you are. Range is how low you are. It's pretty easy to see how low we are right here. And the highest point on the graph. Highest point on the graph, we could go with either of these that are up and to the right or up and to the left. So the lowest my graph goes down here at the bottom, the lowest it goes is 0. That's right there at the origin, 0. The highest it goes, I'm pretty sure you guys agree, is going to be positive infinity. Positive infinity because it's never going to stop going up and up and up because there's arrows pointing up. So my range, I could write it as y is greater than or equal to 0. That's one way. Or the other way, if you remember, 0 less than or equal to y less than infinity. All right, guys, there's a little summary. Please read over these documents. Make sure that everything looks good once you've read over the other parts of these. And as always, if you have questions, you can watch the video again. You can email me. You can look up a little bit more online. and look at the answer keys for some hints if you need it. All right, guys, have a great start to your week. Thanks for listening.